Fire in the Fjord. A brutal origin story of the first Vikings. Snow fell like ash over Hrafnvik. The village crouched at the edge of the northern sea, its roofs buried under white. Once alive with song and smoke, it now whispered only of hunger. The fjord had frozen over. The fish were gone. The barley never sprouted. And the gods had stopped answering. Inside the longhouse, the air hung heavy with silence. A boy lay on the wooden table, stiff and pale. His lips were blue. His hands, thin and curled. Around him stood 12 men and women, hollow-eyed, wrapped in fur and silence. Skarde, the boy's brother, stood closest. His face didn't move. "He died last night," said an old woman. "Took his last breath asking for bread." Skarde didn't reply. His eyes stayed on the boy. His name had been Yari. Barely 9 winters. Never raised a blade. Never sailed a fjord. Freydis, dark-haired and sharp-eyed, stepped forward. "This makes 10 this month." "For children," added Kettle, the blacksmith. "The winter's worse than the last." "No," Skarde said finally. "The winter isn't worse. We are weaker." The wind howled outside. The walls creaked. Freydis looked at Skarde. "We've always made it through." Skarde's voice was quiet. "Not this time." He turned to face them, the last of Hrafnvik's strength. Warriors, hunters, a few hardened elders. Scars marked their faces. Hunger hollowed their eyes. "I buried Yari in the dark before dawn," Skarde said. The ground was too frozen to dig deep. He let that settle. "Next," he continued, "it will be the rest of us." There were no arguments. Only stillness. "But I've heard stories," Skarde said, stepping closer to the fire. "West, across the mountains. Villages. Farmland. Rivers that don't freeze. Smoke rising from warm halls." Kettle snorted. "You chase fairy tales?" "No," Skarde replied. "I'd chase life. Or die trying." They left before the next sunrise. 12 of them. Skarde, Freydis, Ulfr the old warrior, Kettle the smith, Ragna with her bow, young Egil, and 6 others. Each wore layers of wool and leather. Each carried a weapon, axe, knife, or hunting spear. They carried no pride. Only desperation. Behind them, the village shrank into the snow. Children waved from doorways. Old men watched with knowing eyes. "Tell the gods we died trying," Ulfr muttered as they crossed the first ridge. The climb was brutal. The first day, the wind stripped warmth from their bones. By the second, Kettle's hands turned black at the fingertips. On the third day, Ragna slipped on ice and broke her leg. She gritted her teeth, refused to cry, and demanded they leave her behind. "I'll feed the crows," she said. "You'll feed our people." On the 4th day, Egil, just 16, collapsed. Freydis carried him for hours until he could walk again. But on the 6th day, they saw it. From the summit of the last ridge, the ice finally gave way. Below lay green valleys. Thin rivers winding through the snowmelt. Smoke curling from chimneys. Wooden villages built beside thawed lakes. Skarde said nothing. His eyes stung. Not from wind, but from the first flicker of hope in many moons. They descended slowly. And by nightfall, they crept toward the edge of a small farming outpost. Maybe 30 people. A few pens of goats. Smoke rising from a longhouse. Skarde crouched in the trees. "We go at dawn," he whispered. "We take everything?" asked Ulfr. "Only what we need," Skarde replied. "No fire. No blood, if we can help it." But it didn't go that way. The next morning, they entered the village just after first light. A farmer spotted them, raised a shout. Panic spread. Some villagers tried to flee. One raised a hoe in defiance. Freydis cut him down. Screams. Running. A goat bleated. The warband moved quickly. They took bread, salted meat, blankets, tools. One child tried to fight Ulfr with a kitchen knife. He gently knocked the boy aside, leaving him unharmed. Freydis stopped in a doorway. Inside, a woman, cradling a baby. Their eyes met. The woman did not scream. She only clutched her child tighter. Freydis turned. And walked out. They did not burn the village. They did not kill more than they had to. But before they left, Skarde took pitch from the hearth and painted a black raven across the door of the longhouse. Let them remember, he said. They retreated to the woods. That night, they ate. Real bread. Real meat. For the first time in moons, they felt warmth not from fire, but from full bellies. Ulfr laughed for the first time in years. Kettle wept silently beside a tree. Egil dreamed of girls and warm beds. But Skarde sat apart, sharpening his blade. Freydis joined him. We did what we had to, she said. Yes. You didn't kill a soul. No. But you're still cold inside. Skarde looked at her. I saw my brother die for a half loaf of rye, he said. And I saw a child today, hiding under a table, the same age as he was. You spared him. Yes, Skarde said. But I felt nothing. Weeks passed. The raiders returned to Hrafnvik, bringing food and warmth. Their people wept with joy. But word spread, of the strangers from the snow, the raven marked. Other outcasts came, drawn to fire and leadership. By spring, they were no longer 12. They were 50. By summer, they were over 100. They built fires on the cliffs. Repaired boats. Sang songs of old gods and new hunger. But when a young boy asked Skarde, are we just thieves now? He replied, no. We are a people who were forgotten. And we are reminding the world we are still here. And so it began. Not with glory. Not with conquest. But with a village that could not feed its own. And a man who chose to cross the mountains, rather than die waiting for salvation. The first Vikings were not kings. They were survivors. The road west. The thaw came slowly. Skarde stood on the edge of the wind-scoured cliff and looked down at the fjord. The ice was finally breaking apart. Great slabs drifted apart like bones beneath the water, cracking with the groan of ancient things stirring from sleep. They had survived the winter. Barely. The food from the raid had saved them, but only just. Children still coughed at night. Men and women bore the hollow eyes of those who had stared too long at death. But now the snow was melting, and with it came something foreign to Hrafnvik, hope. Yet Skarde felt no peace. He looked not to the sea, but to the west. His hands clenched the railing of the watchtower, knuckles white as frost. The war band was growing. They had been 12 when they crossed the mountains. Now they were more than 50. Outcasts. Nomads. Orphans. The broken and the brutal. They came with scars, old swords, and the look of people who had nothing left to lose. And they had come because of him. Freydis stood beside him now. Her face weathered, her braids matted with wind. They follow you, she said. But for how long? He didn't answer. In the moons that followed, small groups ventured from the village, scouting, hunting, raiding. Some returned with goats or barrels of mead. Others didn't return at all. A group of 5 vanished crossing the southern pass. Ulfr, the old shield-bearer, called it foolishness. But Skarde sensed something else. They were not alone out there. One evening, Egil stumbled into the longhouse, bleeding from a gash above his brow. Movement, he said, gasping. A dozen men. Watching us from the western hills. That night, Skarde gathered the clan. No more camps. No more waiting. We move, he said. We go west. Not as beggars. As people. We carve out what the gods denied us. Some murmured. Others nodded. All knew there was no other way. They left at dawn. 57 in all, warriors, women, children. Some carried carts, others bore tools, furs, or the last of their bread. The rest bore blades. The mountains loomed behind them, the land unfolding ahead like a challenge. They crossed rivers where the water bit to the bone. They slept in the cold under crude shelters of bark and hide. They passed ruins, old farmsteads and burned-out huts, and whispered tales of forgotten clans. Skarde led from the front, his axe slung across his back. Each step away from Hrafnvik was a step into something new, something not just survival, but becoming. On the 12th day, they reached the river. It was wide, cold, fast. On the far side stood a village, thatched roofs, grazing livestock, smoke curling peacefully into the morning air. Fences marked small fields. Wooden walls rose just beyond. It was as the scouts had promised, ripe. Too ripe. Looks too easy, Freydis said. Skarde watched, silent. For 2 days they waited, watching from the tree line. The village had guards, but soft men, more ceremonial than warriors. Farmers with bows. Boys with hunting knives. Egil scouted the northern ridge. When he returned, his face was pale. We're not the only ones watching, he said. They struck in the night. Not the villagers, but them. A rival clan, perhaps. Shadows in the tall grass. Arrows in the dark. The camp awoke to screams. 2 fires lit in panic. Freydis dragged a child from a burning tent. Ulfr bellowed orders. Skarde grabbed his axe and sprinted into the melee. He didn't hesitate. Steel met steel. Skarde felled one man, then another. Egil shouted something lost in the chaos. The enemy fought with precision, trained, organized. One of their own was dragged into the woods, never to be seen again. By dawn, it was over. They buried 11. One enemy had been captured, a young man, barely more than a boy. His eyes were fierce despite his broken arm. We saw your mark, he said, spitting blood. The raven. We knew what you were. Skarde crouched beside him. And what are we? The boy glared. Ghosts, he said. Carrion. You bring only fire and ruin. The attack changed everything. No longer were they just survivors or scavengers. They were seen as a threat. The raven they painted on doors had become a symbol not of fear, but of war. Skarde gathered the warband. We wanted peace, he said. We wanted land. We wanted to live. He paused, then looked out at them, scarred faces, tired eyes, hardened souls. But they won't let us. Because they remember the old ways. The soft ones forgot how sharp we can be. He raised his voice. So we sharpen ourselves again. At dawn, they crossed the river. Rafts lashed from timber. Ropes. Wading through freezing water. Egil nearly drowned dragging a child across the current. By midday, they were through. They struck hard. The village guards fell quickly, too slow, too unready. Ulfr led the charge at the gate. Freydis fought like a storm, blood on her face, her braids flying wild. But Skarde gave a different order. No burnings. No cruelty. No waste. They took what was useful. They spared the elders. They took the grain, the tools, the animals. When they reached the village elder, Skarde stood tall. "You live because we need you," he said. "Teach us the soil. The rivers. The seasons." The old man nodded, trembling. They did not leave. They stayed. They repaired the walls. Cleaned the blood. Planted in the fields. Built forges. Hunted elk in the northern woods. They did not rest. The raven was carved again, not as a warning, but as a banner. And with it, a name. The Raven People. Children laughed again. Women sang over grain bowls. Men trained not just for raids, but to defend what they now called home. Skarde walked the village one night as the stars blinked into the sky. He passed huts with smoke curling from roofs. He passed Freydis sharpening her blade, and Egil teaching a boy to string a bow. Ulfr met him at the gate. "This is a good place," the old man said. Skarde nodded. For now. Because he knew what they had become. And he knew the world would not ignore them for long. The rise of the raven. The morning fog clung to the valley like breath from a dying beast. Pale light filtered through ash-colored skies, and the land carried a strange silence, the kind that comes before a storm. Skarde stood at the edge of the longhouse, hands bloodied from the forge. A new blade rested on the anvil behind him, its edge glowing faintly from the quenching. In front of him, the land was changing, fields where forests once stood, wooden frames of houses, fences carved from pine. They were no longer just survivors. They were settlers. Builders. But something deeper stirred inside him. Peace, though earned, felt foreign. Unnatural. He had not bled for soil to sit and grow old. He had bled for a future no one could yet define. It wasn't long before the gods, or perhaps fate, answered. The first fire. They saw the smoke first. It came from the hills beyond the river, the place Skarde's war band had scouted weeks ago. Too far to be accidental. Too steady to be a campfire. When they reached it, all that remained of the small village were blackened bones and collapsed roofs. Bodies were nailed to trees. Some were children. Freydis dropped to her knees. "They weren't even warriors," she said. "No," Skarde growled. "They were a message." Egil, crouching beside a half-burnt cart, held up a crude wooden idol, two wolf heads snarling back to back. "Wolf clan," he spat. "They've come west. They think we're weak," Skarde said. "That was their mistake." He looked back toward the valley. His people. Not anymore. His clan. Blood for bread. It was Ulfr who stood before the gathered warriors that night, under the flickering torchlight, and told them the truth. They will not stop. These are not bandits. These are old blood, exiled warriors who eat what they kill and burn what they do not. Silence followed. The crowd was full of farmers, herders, children. But in the front row stood warriors hardened by fire and hunger. People who had fled death once and would not do so again. "Then we ride," Freydis said. "And we ride not to survive, but to make them fear." And the crowd roared. The night hunt. They struck at twilight. 25 strong. Mounted on shaggy ponies, weapons gleaming in moonlight. Skarde led them through the ravines where the wolves were camped. They moved like smoke, silent and fast. The wolf clan was not prepared. The first line of their scouts fell without sound. The second died choking on their own steel. But the chieftain, a broad-shouldered beast with a boar's tooth necklace, rallied his warriors fast. The forest turned to fire. Skarde met him in a clearing, and their blades kissed under the stars. "Vulture," the man sneered, "come to pick the dead." "I came," Skarde said, "to make you one of them." They fought for what felt like hours, blade to blade, blood for blood, until finally, Skarde's axe found the man's throat. The wolves howled. And then, they fled. The banner rises. At dawn, the warband returned with blood on their clothes and prisoners in tow. They dragged the broken shield of the wolf clan into the center of the village and split it in two. Over it, Freydis raised a new banner, black linen with a single white raven stitched in the center. A symbol. A warning. A beginning. The villagers gathered, quiet at first. Then cheers rose like thunder. Children clutched wooden swords. Elders bowed. They began to whisper a name. Raven Clan. And for the first time in his life, Skarde saw something more than fear in their eyes. He saw faith. The price of power. But victory is a double-edged blade. The prisoners from the wolf clan sat in the dirt, hands bound. Among them, a boy, barely 16 winters old, trembling. Skarde watched him closely. "You fought," he said, "with monsters." The boy didn't answer. Freydis stepped forward. "They killed children. I had no choice," the boy whispered. "They would have killed me too." Silence. Skarde drew his blade, then paused. "No more chains," he said. "If he stays, he fights with us. If not, he walks free." The clan murmured. "Mercy?" Egil asked later. "No," Skarde said. "Justice. The legacy begins." As the seasons turned, the Raven clan grew. New refugees arrived, Skarde from other lands, drawn by the rumors of a rising force in the north. Skarde welcomed them with steel and shelter. Fields flourished. New forges rang out. Boys became warriors. Girls learned to track and wield blade alike. Skarde trained them all. Not to conquer. Not to rule. To survive with purpose. Still, he never smiled long. The dreams came often now, visions of blood-soaked fields, a river running red, a mountain wreathed in fire. And a voice, calling from beyond the fjords. "You are not done." The road ahead. On the eve of the harvest, a scout returned with a story that would shape their future. A ship, he said. Big as a mountain. Sailed from the west. Iron shields on its sides. It flew a red flag, serpents and suns. And it burns the coast. Silence fell. Freydis looked at Skarde. "What does it mean?" "It means," Skarde said, gripping his axe, "we're not the only ones who rise." He turned to the fire, where the raven banner hung like a shadow. And he knew. The world was changing. The time of small clans and quiet forests was ending. Something greater was calling. Ash and oath. The smoke on the horizon was not theirs. It rose like a warning, black and heavy, blotting out the sunrise and casting long shadows across the waking valley. Skarde stood at the ridge with Freydis and Egil beside him. All three were silent. It wasn't war. Not yet. It was something worse. A kind of emptiness that followed destruction. "We ride," Skarde said. "Today?" Freydis asked. She knew his answer before he spoke. Now. The burned path. By midday, they reached what had once been a coastal village, 24 huts, fishing boats, smokehouses, and families. Now it was ash and bone. No signs of a siege. No arrows, no bodies, only red earth, bloodstains that stretched toward the forest. Whole families had been taken. No one escaped. Egil asked the wind. Freydis knelt by a pile of scattered fishhooks. Her hand hovered over them like she was afraid to touch. "They moved quickly," she said. "Organized." Skarde narrowed his eyes toward the sea. In the distance, a longship drifted across the waves, taller than any he'd ever seen. Its sails bore no symbol. Just black. "Not wolves," he muttered. Something older. The silent hill. That night, they followed the trail into the woods. Bones lined the trees like decorations, carved and arranged in spirals. Crows watched from the branches, unmoving. And in the clearing, they found it. A circle of stones. Each marked with a rune they didn't recognize. Each splashed with blood. And in the center, a woman, eyes sewn shut, lips cracked open from chanting. Egil moved to silence her, but Skarde stopped him. "She's not the enemy," he said. Freydis leaned in. "She's seen what we haven't." When the chanting stopped, the woman whispered. "They come from the ice. They come for the dead. And they do not fear gods." The council fractures. Back in the Raven camp, tension sparked like dry tinder. Ulfr argued for walls. Egil called for alliances. Others whispered of leaving, of sailing south before the darkness reached them. But Skarde would not bend. "We fight," he said. "Or we will vanish like the villages before us." He turned to the people, not just warriors now, but families. Children who carved wooden ravens. Elders who still remembered fire. "We are not the prey," he said. "We are the storm." And one by one, heads nodded. Oaths were sworn that night in blood and in mead. And war drums echoed long after the fire died. The fire trial. To understand their enemy, they had to catch one. So Skarde led a raid into the far reaches of the coast, where the black sails had last been seen. They found a camp, small, temporary, but marked with the same spiral stones. And in it, a man in black. He didn't resist. He smiled. Skarde dragged him back in chains. They learned little. He wouldn't speak in any tongue they knew. He just watched, waiting, grinning with broken teeth. Until Skarde offered a trade. "Tell us what you are," he said, "and I'll give you a warrior's death." The man leaned forward. "We are what you will become." Skarde kept his promise. And burned the body to ash. Visions in the ice. Winter came early. And with it, the dreams returned. Skarde saw the sea frozen over, with ships caught mid-sail in walls of ice. A mountain split open, and from it, shadows with no eyes poured into a village that looked like theirs. He woke with frost on his beard and blood in his mouth. Freydis, too, dreamed, of a woman with pale skin and a voice like thunder. Egil saw fire and snow colliding, leaving only smoke. They began to believe the warnings were more than superstition. The gods were not watching. Something else was. The naming of a people. By now, the Raven clan was more than a name. Other clans sent envoys. Survivors asked to join. The Raven banner flew over 4 valleys and beyond. But Skarde knew what came with power. He remembered his father's final words. Strength without purpose is just cruelty. So he called his people to the central hill, where the oldest tree had been planted, the ash tree they had named Hope. There, he offered a choice. "We are no longer just bloodlines clinging to the earth," he said. "We are a people. And our story is just beginning." They cheered. Not for war. For meaning. Ash and oath. On the first day of deep winter, every warrior swore their blade to the Raven throne. Not a throne of gold or stone. But of iron, carved by hand, built by the people themselves. Ulfr placed his old axe across Skarde's shoulders. "You are more than a war chief now," he said. "You are the first king of our kind." Skarde bowed, not in arrogance, but in burden. The clan was no longer his shield. It was his to carry. But peace was a lie. Because as they celebrated, as the oaths were sung and the fires danced, the black sails returned. And with them, a new kind of death. Legacy of iron and ice. The sky cracked open with the sound of distant horns. They came not on foot or by firelight, but with sails blacker than night and hulls forged with steel that reflected no flame. 5 ships, taller than any tree in the valley, glided across the frozen sea like shadows chasing silence. And as they landed on the northern shore of the Raven territory, the world changed. For the first time, Skarde felt something colder than winter. He felt time folding in on itself. These were not raiders. They were echoes of what he feared the Raven clan might become. The Red Coast. When the warning fires lit, the Raven warriors assembled without hesitation. Freydis led the charge north, Egil at her side, Skarde behind them, silent, heavy with knowing. They found the first village gone. Not destroyed. Gone. No bodies. No blood. Only frozen outlines where people had stood, where carts had once rolled, where fires had once burned. The trees were dead. The sea was quiet. And then came the drums. Low. Measured. Beating like the heart of a buried god. The war beyond fire. The Raven clan met them in the valley of Varkholt, where 3 rivers met. The enemy wore no armor. Their bodies were covered in leather, iron scars, and symbols Skarde had never seen. They spoke in a tongue older than the fjords. They didn't shout. Didn't rage. They simply advanced. The battle was brutal. Axes met spears. Shields splintered. Ice cracked beneath blood. Freydis killed 6 before falling to a wound in her side. Egil held the left flank until his blade broke. And Skarde found their leader. A pale-skinned man with no hair and eyes like empty sky. He did not speak. He only raised a blade that shimmered like mist. Their duel lasted longer than the sun hung in the sky. The breaking. Skarde bled from a dozen cuts. His enemy bled from none. And then, finally, he saw it. The man wasn't human. Not fully. His skin did not tear. His eyes did not blink. And when Skarde struck true, the blood that spilled was black and cold. "What are you?" he asked, gasping. The creature only whispered, "Your future." Skarde drove his axe through the man's throat and howled to the sky. And the storm broke. Reckoning. In the days that followed, the Raven clan did not celebrate. They buried their dead. Freydis lived, barely. Egil would limp for the rest of his life. Dozens were lost. But the enemy, whatever they were, had retreated. For now. Skarde stood by the sea as the bodies were sent to flame and driftwood. He watched the horizon. "We won," Ulfr said behind him. "No," Skarde replied. "We survived. There's a difference." The legacy forged. From the ashes of that war, something new was born. Not just a clan. A people. They called themselves Vikings, a word once used only for raiders. Now it meant more. It meant a bond formed by fire and frost, by choice and by oath. Skarde was no longer just a chieftain. He was their voice. Their blade. Their first king. Years later. Skarde sat beneath the ash tree named Hope, his beard white, his hands still calloused. Children ran through the village, now a town. Ships lined the coast. The banner of the Raven flew over hundreds. And in the distance, new sails rose. Not black. But blue. Green. Red. Other clans. Other people. Coming not to destroy. But to join. Final words. Skarde did not live forever. But his story did. Sung in the halls of stone, carved in the shields of kings, whispered across icy seas. He was the first Viking. Not the first to fight. But the first to rise above survival. And shape a world. The end. For more interesting and heart-touching videos, please visit our YouTube channel and like and subscribe for our motivation. Thanks for watching.